Welcome to the Geostrategic Podcast.
Today, we're really getting into something pretty intense unfolding in the Caribbean. We're talking about a very significant military presence. I mean, the undeniable fact is that U.S. warships are currently operating right near Venezuela. And that, well, it immediately raises a huge question for us and certainly for you. What are Maduro's chances?
Yeah, that's exactly what we need to figure out in this deep dive. Our mission today is really to unpack the layers behind this military deployment. We need to understand the real motivations, beyond the headlines, and assess how likely this is to boil over into actual military conflict. Plus, we have to take a hard look at Maduro's international allies. Who are they, and more importantly, how reliable are they really? We've waded through quite a bit of information, trying to synthesize it all to give you the clearest picture possible, sort of cutting through the noise.
Okay, so let's start with the U.S. presence itself. You mentioned the deployment, 3 Aegis-guided missile destroyers, pretty heavy hitters, plus other warships near Venezuela. Officially, the stated reason is countering drug trafficking, which, the administration says is a priority. And it's not totally unprecedented, right? Wasn't there a similar deployment a few years back, 2020?
Exactly, yes, back in 2020. So the anti-drug mission isn't new framing, but when you look at the context, the history between the U.S. and Venezuela, it's pretty clear this naval deployment is part of a much bigger, much more intense pressure campaign against Maduro. It's not just about ships floating out there. It feels very calculated.
Calculated how? What else points to this being more than just chasing drug smugglers?
Well, look at the other actions happening almost simultaneously. The reward for information leading to Maduro's arrest, it's been doubled. We're talking $50 million now. He's being explicitly called one of the largest narco traffickers in the world. That's very direct language.
50 million, wow.
Yeah.
That's definitely sending a signal. But strategically, does a bounty like that actually work? Or does it just make Maduro dig his heels in even more?
It's probably a bit of both, honestly. But the main goal seems to be isolation and stripping away legitimacy. And it goes further. The U.S. Department of Justice actually indicted Maduro, naming him as the head of this Cartel de los Soles, basically a drug network supposedly operating within the Venezuelan military itself.
A cartel within the military.
That's the allegation, yeah. And what's really interesting is how they targeted this group. When the Trump administration acted, they didn't slap the usual foreign terrorist organization label on them, which they do for other cartels. Instead, they created this very specific, almost surgical, new class of individual sanctions handled by the Treasury Department.
Why do that? Why not just use this standard label?
It seems like a very deliberate move. It allowed them to target Maduro and his inner circle very precisely without causing the massive, maybe irreversible diplomatic and economic chaos that comes with labeling a whole state entity as terrorist. It's a different kind of pressure, very targeted. You heard White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt say it plainly. Maduro is not a legitimate president. He is a fugitive head of this drug cartel.
Yeah.
That really shows you how the U.S. administration views him, not just as a political figure they disagree with, but as a criminal threat.
That detail about the specific sanctions is fascinating. A more surgical approach, maybe? Does this suggest a new way the U.S. might apply pressure elsewhere?
It certainly points towards a more nuanced tactic, yeah. Trying to hit the leadership hard without perhaps causing a complete state collapse, which could make the humanitarian situation even worse. But okay, let's pull back for a second. Beyond the geopolitics and these pressure tactics, why should people listening care so deeply about Venezuela? What's the real human story here that's critical? Because this isn't just about leaders and sanctions. Venezuela is stuck in this devastating years-long crisis. Political repression is widespread. We're talking serious abuses against opposition figures, journalists, anyone who speaks out. And the human cost is staggering. Nearly 8 million Venezuelans have fled the country. That's one of the biggest displacement crises anywhere in the world right now. And in that kind of environment, armed groups, criminal organizations, drug traffickers, they thrive. And there's serious allegations about their connections to people in authority.
8 million people. That's almost hard to comprehend.
It is. And politically, Maduro just ignored recent election results where, according to the opposition's counts, Edmundo Gonzalez got more than double his votes. Earlier this year, Maduro basically claimed an illegitimate mandate to stay in power. Since then, we've seen this deepening campaign of repression, as reports call it, against anyone pushing for democracy. The stories from political prisoners, even from U.S. hostages who are eventually freed, are harrowing. So these recent moves, the bounty, the hostage releases, some see them as maybe, just maybe, a small window of opportunity for change.
It paints a really grim picture internally. So Washington is turning up the heat, the warships are there, How's Maduro actually pushing back against all this? What's his countermove?
Well, Maduro's response has been pretty strong, trying to project strength both at home and abroad. He and his officials are calling the U.S. operation a psychological operation aimed at regime change. Though, interestingly, while they're condemning it, they also seem to be downplaying the risk of actual U.S. military intervention, suggesting they think it's unlikely, maybe trying to calm nerves.
So rhetoric for the international stage, but maybe managing expectations domestically.
Seems like it. Domestically, he announced the mobilization of the Bolivarian militia, claiming millions are ready to fight. But, observers point out that a lot of these militia members are, well, pensioners or poor Venezuelans. They often join for the government support, the food handouts. So it might be more about projecting an image of popular support and internal control than creating a genuine fighting force.
Right, so the militia mobilization sounds dramatic, but might be more show than substance.
That's the assessment from many analysts, yes. It fits a pattern of using state structures for optics and control. He's also ordered about 15,000 Venezuelan troops to the Colombian border, which is a significant move, and imposed a nationwide ban on drone flights. Little things adding up to look like a state preparing for something. His defense minister, Pedrino, also announced naval patrols in their territorial waters, specifically mentioning the oil export routes, a clear economic signal.
So troop movements, drone bans, naval patrols. He's trying to look resolute. What about diplomatically? Is he trying to rally support?
Absolutely. The strategy seems to be rally the base at home by blaming the U.S. and try to build regional solidarity against Washington. We saw that with a letter sent to UN member states, basically asking them to condemn the U.S. moves as an escalation.
And how did that go down, particularly with neighbors like Colombia?
Well, Colombia's response was interesting. They basically said they got personal assurances from U.S. officials that direct military intervention in Venezuela is off the table. That's quite telling. It suggests regional players are actively trying to de-escalate, getting guarantees behind the scenes.
Okay, off the table. That's a significant phrase. So let's cut to the chase. What are the chances of this actually escalating into military conflict? Is this just political theater, or could things really kick off?
Look, the Atlantic Council calls the naval deployment an important show of force, which it certainly is. But, and this is key, they emphasize it does not necessarily mean military strikes are coming. It's seen more as a strong warning signal to the Maduro regime, maybe specifically related to concerns about figures like Maria Corina Machado being detained. It's about increasing pressure.
So a warning shot, not necessarily the start of a war.
Exactly. And remember the broader context. The Trump administration, despite some very tough talk, generally aimed to end wars, not start new ones. That aligns with things like sending Special Envoy Richard Grenell to actually meet Maduro in Caracas earlier this year. That's engagement, not invasion prep.
And maybe the most practical point, the U.S. is still cooperating with Maduro's government on deportation flights.
Deportation flights, really.
Yeah.
Even with all this tension, yes. 9 flights just last month, mostly charters paid for by the U.S. government, going directly from ICE detention centers to Caracas. You simply can't do that without regular functioning communication channels between Washington and Caracas. So despite the warships and the rhetoric, the evidence points to a strategy of sustained pressure, communication, maybe coercion, but not imminent military strikes.
Okay, that's a really crucial distinction for everyone listening. Sustained pressure, yes. Imminent invasion, likely no. Now, what about Maduro's allies? He's not completely isolated on the world stage. Who's really backing him? Let's start with China. What's their role?
China is huge for Venezuela. They call it an all-weather strategic partnership. Economically, they are Venezuela's most important economic partner. Beijing has poured in over $60 billion, mostly loans backed by Venezuela's oil and minerals. That's a massive investment. Politically, they provide strong backing internationally, opposing U.S. sanctions, talking about non-interference, and they've provided technology too, including some pretty advanced social control systems, things like personalized IDs, tracking tech, which helps Maduro maintain control.
Social control tech.
Yeah.
That's concerning. But what about military support from China?
That's the key point. Despite all the economic and political support, China has been very careful not to provide the kind of direct military aid that could spark a confrontation with the U.S. Their support is deep, it's strategic, it's economic, it's technological, but it seems to stop short of direct military entanglement that would put them head-to-head with Washington over Venezuela.
Okay, so China provides the economic backbone, the tech, the diplomatic cover, but draws a line at direct military intervention. How does Russia's support differ? Is it more hands-on militarily?
Russia's support feels, well, more comprehensive, maybe more of a full-spectrum lifeline. They have a strategic partnership treaty covering everything energy, finance, transport, medicine, and yes, critically, military and security cooperation. Russia is Venezuela's biggest arms supplier. They sell them lots of hardware. They conduct joint military exercises. Remember those Russian bombers landing in Venezuela?
Yeah.
That sends a very loud message.
Yeah, I remember that. Definitely made headlines.
And financially, Russia steps in with bailouts, debt restructuring, often using state energy giants like Rosneft. Diplomatically, they're rock solid for Maduro. They block anti-Maduro efforts at the UN. They supported Venezuela's bid to join the BRICS group. Russia consistently reaffirms its political and military support, especially when U.S. pressure ramps up. So you see the difference. China's focus is maybe more economic, tech, political cover. Russia offers that, plus significant military aid, financial rescue, and very robust diplomatic backing.
That's a really clear difference. China is the economic giant. Russia, the military and political guarantor, in a sense. So bringing it all together, what does this actually mean for Maduro if things really escalate? If the U.S. pressure becomes unbearable, or if some kind of limited conflict does break out despite the current signs, will these powerful allies actually step in?
Based on everything we're seeing, all the analyses, the official statements, the conclusion is pretty stark. While China and Russia provide hugely important support across many areas, the strong consensus is that they are unlikely to engage in direct military intervention if a serious conflict flares up between the U.S. and Venezuela. Yes, they'll condemn interference, call for diplomacy, denounce U.S. actions, but they've shown little appetite for risking a direct military clash with the United States over Venezuela. Their support is about protecting their own interests, investments, geopolitical influence, but it seems to stop short of fighting a war for Maduro. So at the end of the day, the assessment is pretty clear. No allies will save Maduro in this conflict if it comes to direct confrontation with the U.S.
Wow, that is quite the conclusion. No allies will ultimately save him in a direct fight. It really underscores the limits of these international partnerships, doesn't it? And it leaves us, and you, with a really big thought to consider. When you have this tangled situation, a deep internal crisis, intense international pressure, allies who support you but only up to a certain point, what does sovereignty even mean for a country like Venezuela right now? And what are the long-term effects on the whole region when outside powers play such huge roles, even if indirectly? Definitely something to think about. Thanks for tuning in to this deep dive.
If you found this discussion valuable, please like, share, and subscribe to the Geostrategic Podcast for more in-depth analysis on topics that shape our world. Stay informed, stay ahead, and stay tuned for the next episode.